breaking down everyday workplace issues and diagnosing the hidden sickness, not just the obvious symptom. Our hosts, James and Kobe.
Did we lose a patient?
No, that's just my lunch.
Hey, thanks for joining us. I'm Kobe, he's James, and let's talk leadership.
Yeah, what I really like about this leadership tips format is that we get to practice a lot of these pieces in real time. When we take on fractional leadership roles or the interim roles, we get to work with leadership and management teams through kind of the decision-making process and help them kind of understand where we're going and why. So one of the things that recently came up, and one of the things I really want to talk about from a leadership tip perspective first, is the idea of communicate first and communicate early and communicate often.
Mhm.
Helps to actually get it right.
Right.
But really, one of the things that we see really often in these types of roles is the the challenges or the communications or the um, almost the desire to hold back information.
Right.
And we all make mistakes. There are things that are always that are going to go wrong as we go through our leadership journeys, whether it's, human error that causes issues with payroll and benefits, or it's something happens that damages the organization's reputation or potentially has the potential to damage organization's reputation, or you have key staff members who go off on leave or are, maybe they are leaving the organization entirely. The way in which you talk about these things, the way in which you communicate these issues can be a relationship building tool.
Mhm.
But oftentimes, what I see the default being is, well, we can't tell people that we made a mistake because then they won't trust us. When oftentimes the reverse is true. I
Right.
lean very heavily on the side of it's better to communicate early and often rather than to hold information back. And because it doesn't matter if we are communicating our expectations. I communicate, especially with communicating expectations, communicate them often, communicate them early, set
Mhm.
that expectation. It's a really helpful tool. We've talked about setting and managing expectations many, many times at this point, but it's also true for if you have to break bad news to people, or whether you're celebrating successes, or a myriad of other examples that we could throw out there. Being able to communicate early helps to build trust with your team because it shows them that you are thinking about their needs. Yes, you are going to get pushback and you're going to get blowback from it. If you have to communicate bad news, you know, we made it, there was an accounting error that led to a payroll mistake and it was our fault. People are going to be legitimately ticked off at you because you messed with their pay. The one thing you're not allowed to do is mess with their pay,
Right.
right? But I can guarantee you 100%, there's not many things in this life that I will absolutely guarantee. But if you are not communicating early, if you're not telling people what's going on, they are not just sitting back with big old smiles on their faces saying, let's trust in our leadership because they're not telling us anything. I'm sure they're going to give us the full picture eventually. They are going to fill in the gaps themselves.
Right.
And the gaps, the blanks that they fill in are going to be far, far less flattering than the reality of the situation. So getting ahead of these pieces, being able to communicate with your team, understanding when and how to do that is a leadership skill that can be a very effective relationship tool. It can build trust. It's part of being consistent. It's part of being transparent. And it really is an effective methodology.
So absolutely. And the idea too is like I always kind of encourage the teams that I work with, or in the companies and leadership teams and the individuals, err on the side of over communicating.
Yeah.
Because I mean, now again, the pushback that we often get is, well, what about confidentiality? And what about that we can't tell them everything? And absolutely not. But it's a matter of like that silence is can be deafening when it
Yeah.
comes to something that's going on. Or even just silence can be deafening even when there's not big things happening, just so staff know just even like more mundane things, right? It's that idea of, like that, like if communicating is an afterthought, then staff being in the know is an afterthought. Then staff are seen as an afterthought. And that's how it's
Yeah.
perceived by the staff. If, oh, we're not important enough to know this, which means we're not important. And that's often never the case when we're sitting around the leadership team table, but that is the perception, and perception is more important than reality.
Oh, 100%. And you're right in the, they're erring on the side of over communicating is fine. But that does not over communicating is not the same as oversharing,
Right.
right? There are still elements that we are not going to be able to share with people.
Hmm.
But be upfront about what elements you can't, like, this is people understand boundaries.
Yeah.
People have a lot of problems putting them in place themselves. Let's
Right.
be,
But they get them.
but they understand that, right? They
Yeah.
understand that intellectually they may not like it, but they will probably understand that there are certain things that leadership just cannot tell us, right? And you won't divulge, like if you had to terminate a key staff member, you're not going to divulge why that happened,
Hmm.
right? Because there's confidentiality pieces. You can get yourself in a whole bunch
Yeah.
of hot water if you do that.
Yep.
But that doesn't mean, just because you can't share absolutely every detail doesn't
Hmm.
mean that you should not be communicating with people about the information that you can share. And
Yep.
I think that's a really important distinction to make that often gets
Hmm.
lost,
No.
because it's not about just hammering people with every bit of information possible,
Yeah.
because then you're just going to overload them and it's going to be a mess.
Yeah.
But
And it's
being
funny because,
selective in it and being
yeah.
strategic in it is how you use this skill.
And we've been in exact situations where our recommendation to a leadership team or a CEO has been, make sure you tell the staff about this. They have to know. But you have to tell the story right. And it's funny because sometimes we have heard back people say, well, I can't tell them everything, so I'll tell them nothing. Well, that is just a stupid view. Remember, I mean, like it's often what that is actually that's actually an excuse for someone that sees knowledge as power,
Yeah.
and they don't want to give away any kind of knowledge because to them that equates them giving away power, and that's just someone that really is not able to effectively understand the complexities required for effective kind of people management. In my opinion, this is just my opinion, but this is the thing is that it's like we say, it's about telling the story right. And it's about telling the story that gives people enough that they need to know that they feel hurt, that they feel that they're important in being kept in the loop, that you're giving the respect to the situation and its impact on the organization, but you're also protecting all the parties involved to make sure that people, again, you're not breaching confidentiality, you're not oversharing. And it is something that does allow, or it does require tact, it does require strategy. And I mean, good internal comms teams make this so much easier than just people trying to figure it out for themselves every single time something happens, right? Having a good team to help you, or even having good protocols in place, right, is one of those things that makes a big difference. But I mean, it is something that people do need to understand. Communicate early, communicate often is a good like mantra to just how do you treat your teams, is you treat them by keeping them in the know.
Yeah. And then the detail of that, it becomes, what do you communicate and how do you communicate,
Right.
right?
Yeah, and that brings me to something that, like, I think is really important for us to reiterate. I was trying to figure out if we talked about this before in past episodes or not. I can't quite remember. So, but we talked about, so we have a tool that we use when we do like education for leadership teams and stuff like that. And we call them the perfect 10 miscommunication techniques.
Yeah.
And what they are, they're 10 things that we do really badly when it comes to communication. And man, we see these all the time. And it's funny when we were talking about prep in this episode, we were dealing with an issue with one of our clients, and we had, oh my gosh, that just textbook this one, one of these techniques that we just, it's so perfect example of it, which really just helps us remind us how important knowing these things are. Now, again, I would like to cover some of the perfect 10, obviously not all of them because there's 10 of them and we don't have that kind of time, but there's like four I thought would be really helpful for us to give people some insight on to help them kind of understand that these are things that are super common, but are super terrible communication practices that end up, hurting our efforts. Because again, like you said, if we're communicating early, we're communicating often, if we're communicating badly, then it undercuts the result or the impact of our desire to communicate early and communicate often if we can't do it well, right?
Yeah, I mean, we shouldn't have to put the disclaimer in there that
Mhm.
communicate early and communicate often also includes, good communication.
Yeah,
But let's set that bar that we're actually, when we say communicate early and communicate often, it's implied that you're not terrible at communicating.
right. So if we avoid these four techniques we're going to get into just really quickly, I think that that'll help you be able to make sure that you're not communicating terribly.
Yeah.
So the first one I want to talk about is probably the one that we see the most. It's so funny because I had a conversation with someone very recently about this exact thing. There's a manager that has an issue with effective communication, and it's called the kitchen sink technique.
Hmm.
And this is sometimes intentional, sometimes it's unintentional. Usually we see it as unintentional,
Yeah.
where people provide too much information and overdo their communication efforts to the point that it overwhelms audiences. It's like information is this massive block that they just drop on people's heads, and it's in there. I've told you everything that you could ever need to and want to know, and it's in this 8-page explanation of something that I really probably could have made a paragraph. And again, they give you everything, and partially because it's a common practice for people that are technical experts. They're just
Yeah.
like, I understand this in the depth, and so I'm going to give you everything and all the contexts and all the examples of it, and because their depth of knowledge is so deep that they provide that depth of explanation when their audience probably does not need to know even a fifth
Yeah.
of what they're
If I'm
talking about.
asking you between this choice and this choice, and you give me an 8-page explanation on why which one, the one that you're recommending,
Hmm.
that's kitchen sink. You're just throwing too much technical information at people. You're
Yeah,
sharing, you're oversharing. And what we need to know is here's the recommendation and why,
right.
not here's the full accounting and detailed
Hmm.
analysis of this option versus this option, and then a whole, like, we're not writing reports every time we're,
No.
you know,
And so one thing that we use as kind of a reflection point for folks is we say, how long are your general emails?
yeah,
It's kind of a reasonable litmus test. If you're when you're responding to somebody, giving them information, like you're initiating an email conversation. If your first email is like just like scroll, you may be falling into this habit. Or or if you have a really hard time having a 5-minute conversation with people, that's another sign too.
yeah,
But again, one of the things that we often see is a common use of this too, is we see this sometimes when like organizations try to communicate with like their customers or their stakeholders or whatever, and something's going on that they're trying to keep people updated on, and they just give you this massive kind of like wall of text that everything that you could possibly need to know is in there. And the problem is that is not something that's accessible to everybody. and but you're just so you're not choosing what's important, or you're not providing summaries, or not providing highlights of stuff. You're just saying, here's everything, here's the entire kitchen sink, which is why we call it the kitchen sink technique, and the answer's in there somewhere. Go figure it out,
Yeah.
right?
Or you're every time there's a minor update, you're sending more information, right? It's basically unfiltered information,
Yeah, that's a good way to put
right?
it.
If you are not capable capable might be strong.
Hmm.
Whatever, I'll say it
Sure.
anyways.
All
If
right.
you are not capable of filtering the information that you're providing, you're probably falling into this trap and it's hurting your ability to communicate with your team.
Yeah. So the one advice I use the most often when I'm talking to teams about how they communicate with organization, or with their own teams, or like that, is a phrase that we use a lot at Roman 3. We say error, or it's about being um, compelling and concise over being complete.
Yeah.
And that's really kind of the way that we try and say that's how you should be viewing all your communications. Make it compelling, make it concise, and you prioritize those two things over it being complete and fully every detail. Because again, have more conversations than broadcasts.
Yeah.
So give them compelling and complete, or sorry, compelling and concise information, and then they can follow up and ask more questions. Then you can give them more information and make most communication things a conversation rather than just saying, "Here's a broadcast of all that you could ever possibly need to know. Go in there and find it yourself."
And I think one sometimes this kitchen sink approach happens because it's also tied to the um
Yeah,
next communication error,
yeah,
which is the one hit wonder, right? We want to give people all of the information all at once so that we only have to do it once.
yeah.
But communication is a two-way street, right?
Mhm.
Communication, and this runs counter to the whole communicate early, communicate often. The one hit wonder is really that idea that telling somebody something once is enough to take care of communication.
Yeah.
And rarely is that the case.
Yeah. I mean, like, there are people who are like, well, I sent the person a single email with all the information they could ever need to know. I've communicated effectively, right?
Well, I mean, I've legitimately had conversations with managers where they have been upset with their staff because they set a meeting like 2 months ago, sent one email about it,
Hmm.
no follow-ups, no reminders, no communication, none, like, see this person on a almost daily basis,
Hmm.
nothing in the lead up to the meeting. Because there was no further communication, the staff thought that the whole thing was off, so they didn't show up to the meeting. Now the manager's mad and they want to discipline this person. It's like, man, just take a
Yeah.
step back, take a breath. We
Hmm.
need to one telling somebody something once a couple months ago and then never even referencing it again is not effective communication.
Yeah. 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 The one hit wonder technique is definitely something we see pretty common as far as these perfect 10 miscommunication strategies. Because I mean, yeah, it's the idea of like, it's like, like a single request or a brief explanation, or just that the assumption that saying it one time keeps it in the top of their priority order in their mind. Because but the idea is our work is busy, lives are busy, stuff kind of recalculates the priority lists on a moment to moment basis, let alone a day to day. So if
Well,
it
and especially in a situation where you thought this was a very important thing to do,
yeah.
and you're talking to this person, like even in the week or days leading up to it, and it's not on your radar in your regular
Mhm.
communications with them.
Yeah,
How are they supposed to think that it's still a priority for you if you never mention it again? Anyway,
absolutely.
personal irritant
Yeah,
aside, but it is emblematic of that one hit wonder style of, I've told you, I may have told you a month ago, but I
yeah,
told you, so now the ball's firmly in your court and you are responsible,
yeah.
not
Right. All right. So the third technique of the perfect 10 miscommunication techniques is the different page technique. So
Hmm.
this is often an unintentional technique where people relay information or set expectations and make an assumption that everyone comprehends as clearly as they do without checking for understanding. We see this a lot, and there's just a psychology behind this one. I've seen this. Oh, it can be really difficult when this happens in some really serious techniques or serious situations. Because sometimes our confirmation bias
Hmm.
kicks in, and when someone says something to us, and we kind of already have an idea in our mind of an expected outcome, then what they're saying, we're not actually hearing it kind of objectively. We're almost subconsciously looking for confirmation of our own of our current opinion.
Hmm.
And so we just, you know, accept what we hear. We hear what they say, but then we walk away with completely different takes on it. And the assumption is that we're not validating clarity. We're just going, yep, I think I understand. I think you understand, and we move forward. But sometimes, again, this idea about over communicating can be effectively say, just to make sure we're on the same page, here are the cold, hard facts.
Here's
Sometimes
how
that,
I understand is a
yes.
great way to start those conversations because
Yeah.
it's not about the other person. It's
Hmm.
about here's what I took from it. Here's how I understand the situation.
Yeah.
It can be it opens you up to being wrong, right?
Hmm.
Which is fine because it's not about right or wrong, it's about understanding,
Yeah,
right? And
absolutely.
perspective.
Yeah, and it's the idea too that like we need to really kind of make sure that we're like that we are not on different pages because like I mean and again sometimes it's a matter of like we talked about the repeat back method in some of our other conversations we've had. We do this a lot when we're talking like individual like middle manager training. The idea of repeating back your comprehension at the end of the conversation just to make sure that there's clarity. Again, like we often normalize an hour when we take over teams or when we're revising teams to do same page summaries. So
Yep.
we say, just to make sure, just to make sure we're on the same page, here's my understanding. And again, it's an over communication practice, but it resolves this different page technique that we often see that is so problematic in so many organizations.
Well, it avoids problems cropping up down the road, right?
Yeah,
Like if
the
I
repeat
mean,
back method. Yeah.
yeah, and I think people understand this one pretty well. I mean, I can think of so many examples in my personal and professional life where, because we all fall into these traps at different points.
Yep, absolutely.
They are the reason why they're common mistakes is because everybody does them. They're common. But they're things that we need to keep front of mind if we want to be effective in the way that we communicate as a leader. Because
Right.
like let's tie this back to our leadership journey.
Yeah.
If you can avoid the perfect 10 miscommunication techniques, if you can start to communicate early, communicate often without dumping every single detail on people, and not relying on a single instance of communication to be enough, and making sure that when you need people to be on the same page, that you're taking that route, it can be extremely effective. But there's also one other piece that I think we need to talk about, and that's that all communication needs to be tailored to the audience that you're communicating with.
Yeah.
Whether we're talking about marketing communication in our business, right?
Hmm.
We go detailed into target demographics and understanding client profiles and purchasing decisions, and then we take great pains to craft a message that we know will resonate with a particular group. Marketing is a form of communication.
Hmm.
We can take that same type of, maybe not the same level of detail, but
Right.
that same principle of crafting our narrative in a way that reaches everybody and recognizing that one size fits all communication doesn't work. If you are only communicating in one way, chances are that you are missing a large portion of the demographic that you are trying to communicate with, because people understand, they process information in different ways, whether it's auditory or visual, or whether we're reading, whether, like, the ability to really understand and take the time to look at different ways of
Mhm.
communicating the same message is and it yes, it's going to be more work,
Yeah.
but it's also going to be more effective.
Absolutely, yes, and you're right. And the last one is this one size fits all technique that is so problematic because it assumes all communication strategies are equal and um, all audience members are like unified that there's one perfect way to do all this. But the reality is usually it's not even that thoughtful. It's more of like this method is easiest for me to communicate to others, so I'm just going to do this one thing
I'm
because
busy and it's convenient for me to write an email, so I'm going to write an email and that's going to be enough.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, and there's yeah, it is something that's just a matter of we don't take into consideration the needs of our audience when we communicate, and that's why we fall into the one size fits all. No, you're right. Okay, so we took a little bit longer talking about these than I thought we would, but I think we got into good detail, and these are so important.
Yeah.
But I do think that we should move on to the other two tips, just because I think that we have some good callback options with these. Um, so the tip that we want to talk about, and I'll let you jump into it first, was talking about transforming behavior.
Yeah. Okay. I have yet to meet a manager or a leader who has not wanted to modify the behaviors of their staff.
Right.
It's a big issue.
Mhm.
It's a big topic, I'll
Yeah.
say, because we use a lot of different tools. We try to use performance systems to as behavioral correction pieces. There's different ways that we try to approach it, but I think if I can boil it down to a sound bite,
Mhm.
you have to change the way you think before you can change the way you act.
Right.
And so, I mean, it ties in pretty nicely with the whole communication piece.
Hmm.
If you want to start to transform behaviors in your workplace, you're going to have to transform the way people think about the work.
Right.
If you want to change the actions, then you need to change the thought processes that goes into those actions. Many actions over time, as we get into our behaviors become routine, and we
Mhm.
stop necessarily putting as much thought into the why we're doing these things. So just becomes kind of a natural outpouring, and we respond instinctively or we respond quite naturally.
Yeah.
So the way in which we approach transforming behaviors, what I really want to emphasize in this is how we need to approach the way in which people think about the outcome.
Mhm.
So if you want your staff to approach work in a different way, you're going to have to get them thinking about the outcome in a different manner.
Right.
You have to communicate, and you have to communicate to the audience in a way that they will understand.
Right.
And most importantly, if you want to change behaviors, you need to tell them how this is actually going to be better for them afterwards. Because
Yeah.
if they're going to go through the effort of actually modifying their own behaviors with your support, it better be because it is easier, better, safer. There
Right.
has to be some sort of benefit to them other than just this makes my life easier, so I want you to change. Because you will definitely meet some resistance on that messaging.
Absolutely. So one thing that I think is so important for people to just know, and this is really the psychology behind transforming behavior, and this is critical. You have to understand that to receive transformative change, which is what we're looking for, when we want to transform behavior, the key to that is invoking critical reflection. We have to be critical about our have critical reflective moments, like reflect on our assumptions, our current thinking, our what we consider normal, the shortcuts that we make, all the stuff that we have to challenge the assumptions or the norms in how we think if we want to actually be effective in transforming our thinking, which will be essential to transforming our actions. And that's really the psychology behind peace. And I've I think you and I have a lot of success with transforming behaviors of teams and transforming norms in organizations because we do understand so well that critical reflection is key to transformative change. And one of the things that we do is one of our most powerful tools in doing that is we challenge common understood like expressions and words, but by defining the differences between them, like distinctions are our like hack on how we can really invoke critical reflection in the teams that we work with. And I think a perfect example of that is the one size fits all technique. Going back to that, that is something people think should be good enough because because we're making information accessible to people.
Hmm.
But the truth is, the one size fits all technique is not about making accessibility. It's about making things available to people. So the distinction is understanding the difference between available and accessible,
Yeah.
right? So available means that you are just providing it to people for consumption. Accessible means that you're customizing it so all people have equal access to it.
Yeah. It writing an email and sending it to the entire organization, yeah, it's available. It's
Hmm.
people can go back through their emails, they can refer back to it. It is written and available.
Hmm.
But I mean, as we talked about with tailoring your message to your audience, that's how you make it accessible. That's how you make it impactful for
Yeah.
somebody else.
Yeah.
I can think of an example with challenging one of our managers to look at how they are measuring success in their within their portfolio, and because they wanted to do things differently, but they didn't really know how.
Hmm.
And one of the things that I found really helpful was being able to point them to our Know the Difference video about the difference between contribute and attribute, right?
Right.
Understanding that, especially as we are looking at evaluation metrics, especially as we are looking at, how do we define and evaluate success? It is critical to understand those things that we can contribute to
Hmm.
versus those outcomes that can be attributed to the work that we've done,
Right.
because those are two very different things. And what we as once we understand, as we dug into the distinction between those two concepts, we were able to actually start labeling the different outcomes that were already in place to see, what, there's actually most of the things that we are evaluating, we don't have full control over. They're things that we can contribute to, but we don't necessarily have full control over the outcome. There are other factors involved. So, is it fair for us to hold people accountable for an outcome that they contribute to? Possibly, depending on what we're talking about. Like as a evaluative metric, sure. As part of a larger strategy, though, we need to look at, okay, what can be attributed to that person, to that role, to that
Hmm.
whatever new metric we are trying to create success measures around.
Yeah.
That distinction has been so helpful in making sure that when we are defining what success looks like, we are defining it in a way that actually connects to the work and makes it really easy for people to understand how they are going to be measured and evaluated.
Yeah. Absolutely. And yes, so for you listening, we actually have a YouTube series called Know the Difference, where we actually dig into things like contribute versus attribute, the available versus accessible, and a whole bunch more. So I'll make sure
One of
there's a
my
link.
personal favorites, the difference between a reason and an excuse.
Yeah, so I was gonna say that's probably the one that I use the most often when I'm dealing with difficult interpersonal things or difficult or behavioral things with managers and staff is I say now a reason is context behind why something happened. So lateness is because of difficulties with like people having multiple responsibilities at home and everything else like that too. I understand there's a reason behind this. The
Yeah.
problem is a reason is not an excuse. An excuse is something that completely absolves you of responsibility.
Yeah.
So it's
If
so,
your
so
car breaks down on the way to work,
Yes.
That's an excuse,
That's an
right?
excuse.
That's
Yeah.
outside of your control. If
Hmm.
your alarm didn't go off and you overslept, well, yeah, you have a reason for being late,
Yeah.
but that doesn't excuse the behavior.
Exactly. So understanding the distinction between those two things puts things into greater context, right?
Yeah.
Another one that we use a lot, actually we talked about in our last leadership episode was the difference between reacting and responding, right? The
Yeah.
idea of reacting is something comes up and you kind of have like an immediate needing to figure it out in the moment, whereas responding is about you predict or you have a plan in place for a future eventualities. So the idea of like, when something happens, you just implement the existing plan to respond to the situation, as opposed to reacting is just you're figuring out as you go and you weren't prepared for it, right? So the other one too that we use a lot is the difference between nice and kind.
Yeah. We use a lot of them a lot.
We do because, like I say, these are the hacks that really help us kind of like really create critical reflection in the people that we're working with because it's about challenging assumptions. You think
Hmm.
of like you think of like nice and kind. Nice is pleasantries, is doing things that are pleasing, whereas kind is doing things that are supportive, whether or not they're pleasing. So the example that we always give is being nice is smiling at someone who smiles at you, or
Yeah.
being kind is telling that person they have spinach in their teeth,
Yeah.
right? And the idea of these are two things that most people think are synonyms, but
Hmm.
they're not. And clarifying their distinction is a powerful way to invoke critical reflection, which is often the catalyst needed for transformative change.
Yeah.
So so that's something that we talk about transforming behavior. You're right. You have to change how you think to change how you act. But these types of identifying these distinctions can be a powerful way to start that journey of critical reflection by challenging something that people think are synonyms when they're not. Identifying those distinctions and then classifying the situations amongst those distinctions is so effective. Like I really cannot overstress how helpful this is in all the work that we do and how much our partners love using our content around these things. It's so meaningful and so impactful, but it's also so simple.
It is simple because what we're doing is we're creating common language.
Right.
When we have common language with common definitions, we are on the same page,
Hmm.
right? Like with all of these things, I mean, we started talking about communication. We're still talking about communication.
Yeah,
If we
absolutely.
want to, if we want to modify behaviors, so we need to communicate that. We
Hmm.
need to also communicate our expectations around what is acceptable behavior. We also need to put strategies in place to help people develop that critical reflection and guide them on that journey so that they can, with common language, we can actually start to talk about these situations not from an emotional responsive piece, but from a structured, intellectual, or at least same page mentality.
Absolutely. So I think so. Moving on to the third tip, is the idea of bringing forward solutions.
Yeah. So this is one that this is one that I think gets mistaken quite frequently because there's a lot of language, and maybe it's in some of the organizations that we've supported recently, but solution focused is a term that gets tossed around a lot, and it's not a bad term, right? We
No,
want people to be solution focused. We want them to be looking for how to resolve situations. So the idea of don't just bring me a problem, bring me a solution.
right.
That is helpful, but it's not necessarily enough.
Yeah.
So I wanted first, let's create some common language. All right. So
Mhm.
let's talk about the difference between an issue, a solution, and what I want to propose as the solution is a plan.
Right.
So issues, we know what issues are. When somebody raises a problem to us, they're, if they have an issue with uh, staffing, they have an issue with their manager, they have an issue, whatever that issue may be, they're bringing that forward. And issues tend to be framed around the complaint mentality of, I have a problem, I want you to fix it. This is my problem, go do it.
Right.
Solution is I have a problem. Here's what I think is a solution to it.
Mhm.
Much, much, much better approach than just bringing a problem to me. Where solution tends to fall down is that a solution should resolve that issue, but does it resolve it in the best way possible? Is it
Or in
actually,
the most realistic way
or the
possible.
most realistic way possible? Just because you can resolve a situation doesn't mean that you should resolve it in that particular way. And we've talked many times about plan beats no plan.
Right.
If you want, we, you should have some sort of guiding plan or strategy that you can filter your actions through, that you are working towards, whether that's an operational strategy, a human capital strategy, a marketing strategy, a whatever your within the domain of your responsibilities and your authority level. There should be something that you are working towards more than just getting through the day.
Hmm.
And so issue versus solution versus plan. If we have a plan, then we can look at multiple solutions to an issue and choose the one that is actually going to resolve the situation in a way that advances our plan.
Yeah, absolutely. Because like one of the things that we often see as kind of the natural and unwanted outcome when organizations shift towards this idea of don't bring me a problem, bring me a solution, is they often bring forward a overly simplistic,
Yeah.
divorced of reality and context solution that's just an easy answer. And sometimes it's just another way to present the problem. A common example that we see is, we organizations are struggling with staff retention.
Mhm.
So, and we've seen other consultants say, well, the problem, here's the solution to that problem, is just pay them more.
Yeah.
Which again,
Simple. It is a solution.
it qualifies as a solution, but the problem is it's divorced of the realities of
Yeah.
most workplaces or most organizations, right? It's divorced of the economic indicators. It's divorced of the all the different elements that we've talked about in past episodes about how money is sometimes a more complex situation when it comes to employee retention. It's divorced of the kind of the cascading sustainable effects of an organization's, again, financial situation. It's an easy answer. And this is what we try to avoid when we try and shift from don't bring me a problem, bring me a solution, to don't bring me a problem, bring me a plan.
Yeah.
Because the idea of a plan is about here's the situation, here's the context, here's how to address it, acknowledging realities, and then presenting a possible outcome with some thought and some tact. And the thing is that, yes, it's a lot more work to bring forward a plan than to bring forward an easy answer. But that's a good thing. You're supposed to, again, if something's really important to you. So as an employee, if you identify a problem, then saying the problem to your manager often gets ignored because, well, what am I going to do about this? I don't have time to come up with this. But also, I as a manager don't understand the situation to the degree that you do, so I'm probably not fully qualified to solve this without additional context or additional information. Bringing forward an easy answer as an employee is not any better really than bringing forward a problem, just because again, if it's divorced of the reality, it's just kind of a complaint in a sense.
Yeah.
It's like a veiled complaint. But bringing forward a plan is, okay, as an employee, I see the context, I understand the situation, I'm acknowledging the realities of it. Here's what will actually work at the ground level. That's powerful. That's that's something, if you can normalize that being how stuff is brought forward, that is very much the real solution focus
Yeah.
that the term actually defines, right? It's about actionable strategies, not just, easy answers or vague questions and wants. It really is about that's how stuff happens, and that's how change happens, right?
Yeah. And kind of pulling this back to a leadership tip. what actually happens when you start using that language just around don't bring me a problem, bring me a solution, is that you're setting an expectation that if people bring you a solution, you are going to implement it.
Right.
And that can quickly deteriorate trust and your own credibility with your team. If you are communicating with them that, don't bring me a problem, bring me a solution, they bring you a solution that fixes a problem and you don't implement it and you don't communicate why you haven't implemented it, that is just setting people up for, you're actively creating dissatisfaction. Right? You are creating an environment where people feel like your word can't be trusted because they did exactly what you told them to. From their perspective, you have failed to live up to your obligation.
Right. Whereas if you shift towards don't bring me a problem, bring me a plan for us to discuss, that manages expectations, that puts some onus back on them. It also recognizes your confidence that they are smart enough and they're knowledgeable enough and they're diligent enough to actually be able to be part of the fix, right?
Yeah.
And it's one of those things too where it does not create that same level of just give me an easy answer and then hold me accountable for not implementing your easy answer, right? Again, there's a lot of subtext that it avoids. But the question we often get is, well, how is it that we can make this shift from from going from from pushing a problem culture to pushing a plan culture? A lot of it is defining it with this common language. It's identifying this is what an issue is, this is what a solution is, and this is what a plan is. And so the shorthand will be don't bring me a problem, bring me a plan. But this is what we mean by that. But that's transforming the behavior using effective communication. And if you're communicating early, communicating often, that normalizes it. And it allows you to have this transformational piece where you move towards an actual solution focus, not just a complaint or problem focus.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Way to tie it all together.
that's what I do. All right. Yeah, no, I think this was a really good conversation. I think that, there's a lot in here for people to kind of
Yeah.
digest. I think it's really a really helpful thing for people will be to if again, I'll put a link to our Know the Difference video, our playlist on our YouTube channel in the show notes because again, these are like 3 to 4 minute videos that really kind of dig into kind of some of the stuff. We have some new ones coming that are in the hopper that we haven't released yet around reacting and responding and excuse and reason and those kind of things too. So on the date that we publish this episode, but there's a lot in there already, and those can be very very powerful because like what's great with the videos is you can share the videos with your team to say review this. And then this can be part of our conversations going forward. So you don't have to explain the context of what we mean by accessible and available. We've done all the hard work for you. You can just share it and then lead a discussion around how we're going to normalize these two distinctions. And that's just embedding this transformative behavior into your everyday.
One of the easiest places to start is with nice versus kind,
Absolutely.
because it's simple concepts that people understand. The distinction is clear once you talk about it, and that can start to become the common language that you use in your workplace of, are we actually being kind here or are we being nice? You can use it with your entire staff. It is extremely effective in just if you want to use it with your management or leadership teams to
Yeah.
start looking at that distinction between nice versus kind. It's an easy entry point in.
Yeah. All right. So I think that about does it for us. So for a full archive of the podcast and access to video version hosted on our YouTube channel, visit roman3.ca/podcast. Thanks for joining us.
For more information on topics like these, don't forget to visit us at roman3.ca. Side effects of this podcast may include improved retention, high productivity, increased market share, employees breaking out in spontaneous dance, dry mouth, aversion to the sound of James's voice, desire to find a better podcast.